Hey, let me do a little concluding video on the River of Gods by Candice Millard, a audiobook that I've been listening, which is an autobiography, kind of a memoir-ish of Sir Richard Francis Burton, the explorer, not the actor, John Hanning Speke, the fellow he had the misfortune of um, doing his exploration into Africa with, searching for the source of the Nile, and a fellow who he that Burton hired and that became kind of a fairly close friend, a kind of a companion, close friend of Speak, which is Salim Bombay, a former slave who was arguably the greatest explorer of the three men, a guy who really filled in the map of Africa and is someone I really wasn't that aware of before this book. So I've read a lot of books about Sir Francis Burton, Sir Richard Francis Burton, translator of one of the first translators of the Kama Sutra, of A Thousand and One Nights, explorer, linguist, poet himself. Yeah, just all around super intense, kind of bad guy, a guy who's dangerous to know. There's a whole thread in this book of how the woman that was going to be that did become his wife, Isabel. Isabel Archer. Archer, I think, is incorrect. I'll have to get the correct name if I do an actual review. But how her parents were like, "You're not marrying this guy." She was Roman Catholic. He was very much maybe agnostic, maybe just completely atheistic. Really, it's he's definitely somebody who did not hold religion in great reverence, even though he actually did study religions, the Muslim religion in particular, but many others as well. And I mean, it's notable. One of his other feats, one of the ones that opens up this book as a kind of a way of an introduction to him, is his trip to Mecca, where he disguised himself as a Muslim man, a true believer, and was able to fool his travel companions and make his way into Mecca, which was not open to non-believers and probably not open to Westerners in general, and actually go there and get to and get to and get, document be one of the first Westerners to document it. Now, it's funny, when I first read about this when I was a younger man, like when I was in my 20s, so about 30 years ago, this was like kind of a boy's adventure. I think it was a kind of a almost lightly fictionalized account that I read, maybe through his wife somehow, is how I'll have to. I've never been able to track that book down, but it was like a boy's adventure of like, oh wow, how exciting it is. Not thinking about, it's like, oh yeah, here he is, this Western guy who just does not give a shit about another culture's strictures and taboos. Just like, nope, I'm interested, so I'm going to break all the rules and go and see this, and was fully supported by his Victorian England at the time. He was not really a part of Victorian England in a lot of ways. He is somebody who spent most of his life outside of England and very much did not share the very kind of proper kind of values of the English. That's one of the things that leads him into trouble with Speak. Uh, when he starts making his claims, he is a golden boy, literally kind of fair-haired golden boy, proper British fellow, looking down on the natives, all the kind of that sort of stuff. Not that Burton also didn't have his really terrible racist ideas as well, some of which he seems to have recanted by the end of his life. But um, it's like they go on this adventure, this exploration of Africa. They're both just hammered by illness. It's just like the fortitude of these guys, whatever else you might think about them, the amount of illness, the amount of physical damage that they're taken. There is in one disastrous thing where they are attacked by a bunch of people, and Burton takes a spear that goes right through his cheeks, pierces his palate, on the way through, and he ends up with, like, these scars matching scars on either side of his face, and he's already a guy who has burning, intense eyes. He's a guy who spooked Bram Stoker, the writer of Dracula, and potentially was one of the inspirations for Dracula. That gives you an idea of exactly how intense and vital of a guy Richard Francis Burton was. He is somebody who would be like, wow, he is super intense, will quite happily say whatever he thinks is true, regardless of what are the what are the kind of the held taboos, or the proper things of the time. You know, I think about people who've really run into it with all the kind of strictures we've had lately, and how he would have reacted to them, and he probably would have just bulldozed right through them, not giving a shit, and because he's convinced of his own thing. Now he is ill. Speak goes up to what he thinks is the source of the Nile, and actually, it's not really. It turns out it's true, but Speak is sort of one of these things of like, yeah, he was dumbass who didn't do proper exploration, who didn't particularly take proper observations, was more of just a great white hunter, to be honest, than he was anything else. But he had the luck, or to actually have make the right error that turned out to be correct. So he is now credited as the discoverer of the source of the Nile, even though this book, as a modern biography of these guys, does make the notes like, yeah, people had been living here for hundreds, thousands of years. It was only discovered in the sense that it was discovered for Europeans who wouldn't actually, especially at the beginning of this book, would not take native people who are indigenous to the areas, their word for it, or their information on it. It had to be a European who was doing the measuring for it to actually to take effect. By the end of the book, this does change a bit, but someone like Bombay, who basically is the guy who dragged these two through the wilderness, him and many others who are not as well documented, and maybe didn't go on to as illustrious of stuff as Bombay. They're not people that have been up until very recently kind of recognized as, oh, you know these guys were actually doing stuff at the time. This comes with like Hillary on Everest, and Nashunga. I'll have to get his name if I actually do this review. But the guy who basically, the Sherpa who carried Hillary, not carried, but was basically instrumental in making sure that Hillary didn't die climbing Everest. That kind of a figure. And probably traversed the Everest far more times than Hillary ever did, just as a matter of fact. So it is good in that way. That is the kind of the newness of it. Is that there's a little bit of a focus on that. It's not like another third. It's more like a little eighth of it is that kind of new stuff. A lot of the other stuff, I have to say, because I've read about Burton before, doesn't seem particularly new or particularly fresh. There's a way that this book is extremely well written. It's like it would be a good, I guess, introduction to someone like Burton, if you were kind of just getting into him, because it tells the story very clearly. Doesn't get bogged down in the details. I would just say, it's, even though it is well written and it just kind of flows along, it doesn't have like sort of the urgency that I would expect in a book that I'm sure took a lot of effort to do. It doesn't have that urgency. It doesn't have that, like, oh, there's a reason why I have to tell this story, this new story right now. It's like, no, it's not a new story. It's an old story that's told well, and does add some stuff about Bombay, and just sort of a lot of those caveats of these aren't this isn't a voyage of discovery in that sense of, was already there. It's that this European thing. It's like it doesn't kind of dig into that in a way, maybe, or deconstruct that in a way that I might expect a book nowadays to. It acknowledges it, but it kind of just lets it sit there in a way that seems like a missed opportunity. So while, like, I enjoyed the book, it's like I've been bouncing off so many bouncing off so many nonfiction books lately, that this one has a story. This one has figures that are kind of brought to life. Speak is definitely, you really get the sense of exactly how vain, egotistical, and how much of a grudge this guy would hold very quietly until it suddenly exploded. And he actually ended up being delirious and screaming out all this stuff at Burton on their travels. Which, and Burton's like, I had no idea about this stuff. Burton himself, I don't know if he actually comes across as strongly as I've seen him portrayed elsewhere, of exactly how intense of a guy this was, and how odd he could be, how eccentric he is. There's a point where, later on in his career, he's given like the lowest rung of a post in the kind of in the British kind of diplomatic circles, of like, he's got like basically the little post out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like question just like, well, why would you give him a bigger one? It's like, because he doesn't care what anyone thinks about him. He would take no direction, and he delights in offending people. It's like he would be the worst person to put in a higher post, and you kind of, you agree with that. At the same time, kind of agree, knowing exactly how brilliant this guy was. But I don't know if that is quite as captured as I've seen in other books about Burton. But it's a good introduction. It's a good introduction to Burton. And yeah, I mean, Speak, this is his fate in history. He's never going to, as I think the book notes, he's never going to have his own biography. He is always going to be an adjunct, this terrible rock that Burton slammed into, and that kind of destroyed kind of his any future career. Though I mean, his body was also quite destroyed by the point of after he'd come home from Africa with Speak. And yeah, it's just like, and then you have someone like Bombay, who lived to a much older age, and did a whole ton more in this area. I mean, and a part of that is, the biology of, you were born here, so you actually have all the natural resistors. But there's also just a thing of like the health, the steadiness of the man, the kindness. There's a lot of stuff that I'd be interested if I'll be really interested if someone actually comes out with a biography of him. Sadly, we still seem to be in the sway of the great white explorers. So maybe there isn't another story to tell about Burton, but I look forward to more stories about Bombay. All right. So yeah, those are my thoughts for right now about River of the Gods. I'll definitely pick up. I know that this is considered this is considered maybe minor Candice Millard, and I'll have to pick up some of her other books that are maybe more, she's hit something and she's found a subject that really gets her going, because she's obviously an excellent at marshaling her details, and excellent at telling a story, which is what I need. What I really need in a nonfiction book is a good storyteller. All right. I will leave it there. More videos later.